And we are live once again. Welcome once again to Legal Bites. I'm Alita. I'm a lawyer. And as I always say, on this channel, we explain the law one bite at a time. So with me this week, as every single week, I have with me Nate the lawyer.
Hey, what's
Nate, say
going
hi.
on? Hello, everybody. Nate the lawyer. I am a lawyer also, so we have two lawyers in the house.
Fantastic. Even though sometimes you get people accusing you of not being a lawyer because they don't like what you say.
I know. It's crazy. Nick's gone through it. Emily's gone through it. I've gone through it. You know, it's crazy.
I guess it's a rite of passage, right? When your channel becomes big enough.
Yeah, people just have to say the worst things about you. So, but
Exactly.
it just comes with the territory. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I do like to be feisty, but obviously things go too far. But you know, it just is what it is. Most of the time, it's just harmless. You know, somebody will say the worst possible thing about you, and it's like they didn't say anything.
Yeah, for sure. So this week we don't have Kurt at Uncivil Law with us, unfortunately, but maybe he'll be back for another live stream at some point. But I'm super happy to have Nate with me. We're going to talk about some fun legal stuff
We got a lot of stuff happening this week.
Some of it just happened like today.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how's like in 1 week it's like the world changed so much. You know, like we're talking about Bill Cosby being home. We're talking about Facebook. We got everything going on. Like this was like a week, right? And we're only on Wednesday too. This is not even the week isn't even over yet.
I know, and it's a holiday week too. So, I mean, you'd think. I mean, maybe that's it, right? Maybe it's because like the world knows no one really goes to work on Friday, so we've got to pack everything in the first 4 days.
And knows what tomorrow will bring. Most people are off on Sunday too because Sunday is the holiday. Well, it's not Sunday, but Monday's the holiday. So Monday's recognized holiday. So
right,
we will definitely we're going to see what happens. But what do you think about Well, what's the first story you like to cover?
So first, I mean, let's talk about the one that just came out an hour ago. So this was Britney Spears, the latest in Britney Spears. This wasn't on the list because obviously when we were figuring out what we were going to talk about, this hadn't yet happened, but it is something that TMZ just reported on an hour ago. So apparently the court for the Britney Spears conservatorship case, they heard Britney Spears' attorney had requested to have Britney's dad actually removed as a co-conservator of her conservatorship estate. And the judge actually ruled on that and denied it. So what do you think about that?
The huge caveat is that now he's a I must say co-conspirator. He's a co-conservator. So there are two conservators on there.
There are many that would say that he's also a co-conspirator.
That's true.
Co-conspirator, right?
But do you? I don't know. Let me see if I can screenshot. Do you see where the guy lives though? Like if he's stealing her money, it's like what the hell is he doing? His house is like. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
Oh, I'm about to break some news to you right now. Jamie Spears, right? Spears. I'm home. Because I think TMZ was breaking like where he was living at, and it was like some crazy spot. Yeah, here's the son. Britney Spears' dad lives in a mobile home. Oh,
did you send it to me, or are you sharing it?
I'm about to share it now.
Yeah.
Screenshot. Okay. Tech. Here we go. All right, we're at the son. Boom. There it is.
There we go. Add to stream. Unhappy camper. Britney Spears' dad, Jamie's mobile home, revealed as he spotted for the first time since the singer said he should be in jail. Wow. Okay. This is just a couple days ago.
Yeah.
Okay. So he's all right. Where is that trailer?
I'm not sure. Mobile home doesn't really show. Yeah, he's just chilling. This guy's not living. If he's taking her money, he's not living like he's taking her money.
Yeah. Well, at least not from these images anyway. There could be some other home that people don't know about just yet.
That's true. Britney's dad living in a mobile home.
Or he may have already spent a bunch of money too.
That's possible. But the thing is that it seems to me that the judge believes this guy, whatever he's doing, because a lot of times we'll make snap judgments. Like, don't get me wrong, if she's competent enough to, but there's got to be a reason. There's something. I don't think a judge of competent jurisdiction is going to is going to tell someone who's competently able to do what they can do, that they're going to keep a conservatorship or make it even a co-conservatorship or something. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
the facts have to be pretty outrageous. This is I don't think this is like a, you know how you had those old movies where the husband would tell the what's it called, the psychiatric ward, you know, my wife is crazy, and they can keep the wife in there forever, something like that. Yeah. But this is not this. These are doctors of, you know, there's got to be some type of medical evaluation. There's got to be something. There's got to be something enough, because I would have suspected from all the information I was getting before this that this conservatorship should end. And that's not what the judge is saying. There's something that we're missing here. I think there's a huge hole we're missing here.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And we talked about this last week too, when we were talking about the Britney Spears conservatorship. That, you know, there is still information that isn't publicly available that is absolutely essential in order to really give an accurate read on this case. So, you know, and I've been in front of this judge before. She's been doing conservatorships for years, like at least 3 or 4 years. I don't know, you know, how long she was before I saw her, before I appeared before her, but she's been doing conservatorships for a long time. And so it's not like this is like a new type of law for her to be dealing with. This is every day that she deals with cases like this. So,
well, since you've seen the judge in action, would you say this is a competent judge? Would you say this judge is fair? You know,
I mean, to be completely honest, I can't remember exactly, you know, what it was like being in front of her, but that tells me most likely she was probably pretty run of the mill and wasn't, you know, let me put it this way. If she had been a judge that I vehemently disagreed with on a regular basis, I probably would have remembered that. That's the kind of, you know, emotional reaction that usually sticks out to people over time. But I don't remember that happening. So most likely, I mean, like she's been, from my memory, at least what I can tell, she's a pretty competent, fair judge. So that's
what I'm saying. Don't get me wrong. I agree with the Free Britney campaign and all practical sense, but I think I'm still going to need a little bit more information to go that far to say this should end, because this ruling right here, this judge, by leaving 2 conservatives on the co-conservatives, it leads me to believe one or two things. One, that there's questions about the conservators, the person who was running it before. So let's put somebody as a check, right, just to make sure. And then second, the fact that she kept them on makes me think that there's something here that we're missing, why the judge would think it's important enough to keep an 11-year conservatorship on somebody who's in their 30s and, you know, late 30s to early 40s. That seems extreme to me. That seems like there's something, you know, that seems like a doctor's telling this judge this is not good for this woman. Does that make sense? Or am I way off base?
No, absolutely. And there could be other reasons why the judge may want to see some overlap for a period of time, that maybe there's just administrative matters that it just, you know, the administration of the conservatorship of the estate, that would be a smoother process to transition while there's some overlap for some time. You know, that may be the case. We don't know without actually, you know, being there in the courtroom, you know, with the judge, or, you know, or seeing it on paper even. But that is definitely something that could be a consideration. Now, there, you know, on the other hand, you know, playing the other side then too, there has been some crazy information that has recently become public. Remember last week we were talking about how Britney apparently has a forced IUD so that she cannot have her own children. You know, she said in her statement that she wants to have another child, but she's not allowed to because of her conservatorship. Now, that is a decision that is not the conservatorship of the estate, you know, the money side. That's the conservatorship of the person. That's the healthcare side. So keep in mind, her father right now is not a co-conservator on the medical side, but only on the financial side. So that is not he. I mean, unless that was something that was put in place by him before he was transitioned off of there and it just kind of continued on, you know, maybe he had something to do with that. But I believe it's been several years since he's been on, you know, the medical side, the personal care side of the conservatorship. So
and think about this. even with that statement, that powerful statement that sounded so good that people said, "Oh my God," the judge saw that. That was submitted to the judge.
Yes.
And the judge said, "We're still keeping it on." So
Right.
that's what I'm saying. That unless this judge is just incompetent, because we're just hearing one side of the story. Because I don't believe a judge would hear that story about the IE, that she can't have her own, all that stuff, and say, "We're going to keep this conservatorship going," just like it was before, except for the money side, we'll make it a 50-50 thing. But on this side, we're all good.
Right.
But again, I think that's an unpopular opinion, but I think that's the correct opinion with the facts that I just have now, unless again the judge is just that incompetent.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I agree completely. And keep in mind too that when we're talking about conservatorship, the court is going to take into account the wishes of the conservatee. That's definitely a factor, but that's not the biggest factor. Arguably in a case like this, obviously, we've talked about it before about how this is such a unique kind of a case because, we're not talking about, grandma who's 95 years old and has dementia. We're talking about Britney Spears, who is still, physically capable of touring and performing and, having a relatively grueling sort of schedule, who has been posting on social media and all this kind of stuff and is in those productive years and is in those reproductive years, to be quite honest. So it's very, very different. But a court may take her wishes into account, maybe more so than someone that has dementia, maybe not. We still don't know just how much weight a court would give. At least we can't analyze just how much weight a court would give without knowing the medical history, without knowing, what sort of, like, if she has anything that she's struggling with mental health wise. She may have early onset dementia. That is a thing. That is a thing that shows up for some people, unfortunately.
Yeah, so. And I'll say this: not all mental illness is easy to spot or easy to train. I'm not a mental health professional, so I don't know. But I would just say this: touring and all these other things, and I don't want to be mean to Britney, but that it doesn't really show me that her mental health could be at a stage where she can take care of herself. Right. Because children work, right? You have child actors, for instance, right. and I wouldn't say that they should be able to make decisions for themselves. But then at the end of the day, I think at this point in time, I'm just confident that I'm confident that there's something medically that we're not understanding, that because to limit someone's rights, especially in, like you're saying, these prime reproductive years, somebody who's famous, somebody who's world known, somebody who's people look at this whole thing now that's happening. It's fan driven under the microscope right now, and that judge heard that case, and the judge is hearing all the stuff in the news. Free Britney, this is crazy. Everybody's coming to the defense of Britney. And she looked at that evidence and said, "No, we're going to keep this thing on like this." It's unless this judge got a vested interest in something, it just doesn't make sense. Yeah. And maybe it's just like you're saying, because we just don't know the true extent of her illness, if it happens to be an illness, because I don't even know if that's true. But there's something going on there that's serious enough where you can't have any more kids, and on top of that, this person's going to tell you what to do. That's pretty damaging.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I completely agree. And at the end of the day, I mean, really what a conservatorship is trying to get at is trying to protect someone who otherwise would be very, very vulnerable if basically left out in the wild on their own. So, is Britney in a state where she could actually be, managing her life, paying all of her bills, going to the doctor, going to the dentist, and, being able to negotiate in contracts, being able to, buy a new car, buy a new house, all kinds of those sort of decisions. Is she capable of making those on her own? If she is, then absolutely she shouldn't be in the conservatorship. But if there's a question that maybe she needs to be protected somehow, then that would lend towards maybe she should be under conservatorship. So
yeah, well, I'm assuming too conservatorships are really hard to get to, right? Like I can't go into the court and say I need a conservatorship for a leader, right? I gotta prove a lot of stuff. Even if we were married, like my wife, I can't just go ask for conservatorship for my wife.
Right.
There's a level of things that I have to prove. And
Yes.
right now, and I would have to continue to prove that they are at that particular level, right? If they, like you're saying, if things go back to normal, then that judge is not going to say continue the conservatorship, right? Obviously, it's for certain reasons. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting, and hopefully more will come out. But
Yeah.
Free
Agreed.
Brit, free Brit.
Agreed. Yeah. Free Britney. If yeah, hopefully, I would love it if she does not require conservatorship and for her to be freed from the conservatorship if that's the case. Like most people would, right? Like, why would anybody want her to be imprisoned essentially without,
That's true.
without any sort of recourse? So that's that topic. Now we can move on to the other bombshell that just dropped today, which is Bill Cosby. His conviction was just overturned. You had a really nice short video going through the opinion from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. It was very pithy, great, short, and to the point. I loved it. I love that.
Yeah, I just try to boom, boom, boom. I was saying, can I get it in under 5 minutes? That's my new thing. Under 5 minutes, can it be explained?
That's a good challenge. That's a good challenge to be like, can I explain this in under 5 minutes?
Yeah. But it's hard. It's difficult though, because there's so many nuances that you have to skip, right? There are a lot of nuances in the video that I just had to skip because I just didn't have time. But I wanted to just hammer on. As long as people go out, leave that video understanding just the key points, then it served its purpose. Yeah. And it gets a lot of people to watch because it's only 4 minutes.
Of course. It's like like you're waiting in line for the groceries,
People are like, how can you explain it in 4 minutes? Let me check it out. Haven't you ever seen a video like that where you're like, I want to learn something? You're like, this person explains it in 2 minutes? Challenge accepted. Accepted. Yeah.
That's a good challenge maybe to do for like a month of, can I do every single video, in under 5 minutes?
We're gonna have like it's gonna be like the 8-minute abs, 7-minute abs,
yeah,
6-minute abs. Can you make it 5 minutes?
5-minute abs, 5-minute law.
5-minute law, 5-minute law. Like 3 minutes, 3 minutes. Like issue rule. Apple. We're gonna be reading briefs at that point in time.
That's awesome. So let's go over the highlights. So this was as people probably know, Bill Cosby was convicted 3 years ago of rape for drugging and raping an administrator at Temple University. And so this went all the way up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and they just overturned his conviction. So how about you, Nate? Give us the highlights beyond that.
All right. So essentially, what happens is that the way it works is if you're in jeopardy of being if you're this kind of invokes double jeopardy in the Fifth Amendment, but let me explain. When you are in jeopardy of being sent to prison by the prosecution, then if there was a civil trial and you have to go on the stand and give testimony, you can use your Fifth Amendment right? Because that's the government. That court is the government telling you to answer questions to incriminate yourself. So you can then say, my Fifth Amendment right, I exercise my Fifth Amendment privilege in a civil trial. I'm not talking about a criminal trial, in a civil trial. But if the criminal trial happens first, and let's say you're acquitted, and then you go to the civil trial, then you can be forced to incriminate yourself, or you can be forced to testify incriminating yourself because you won't have that protection of having being eligible to have a criminal conduct, right? Because double jeopardy would apply. So in this case, the DA went over all the evidence, and the evidence, to be honest with you, was pretty damning. It was damning on both sides. In the instance where Bill Cosby's kind of admitted to doing this, but then the victim, she did like so many different things that just was atypical of somebody who you would understand to be a victim. Like, she kept contacting him, she kept meeting him afterwards. She tried to seem like there was like a little extortion going on. Like, I want to let's get paid, filing the civil suit instead of going to the cops. So there were some things that just didn't really add up. So without his confession, the prosecutor said, well, without his confession, there's just so much back and forth here. This is just he said, she said, I'm not going to be able to get a conviction. So let me get some justice for this victim, right? So he goes out and says that they are not going to charge Bill Cosby in this crime, right? So Bill Cosby can go and testify now, since he's not in jeopardy of being arrested or prosecuted. Now, when he went to the civil trial, he can now go and testify because no matter what he says is not going to be used against him because they already said there's not enough. We're not going to use it. You're good. So he goes and, confesses more or less. So, gives it up, incriminates himself all over the place. That prosecutor leaves. New prosecutor comes on and says, well, we didn't have a formal agreement. He just said he wasn't going to prosecute you, but that ain't me, right? I'm going to prosecute you. And guess what? Thank God you made all those statements in the civil trial because we're going to use those to convict you. So they took those statements, used it. Now, both the judge in the lower courts, both affirmed that yes, these statements can be used in conviction, upheld the conviction. Now, the state Supreme Court said, no, this is wrong. He has a due process right. That the state prosecutor gave him assurances that they weren't going to prosecute him, and he gave up his right based on those assurances. Then you have more or less what you got, promissory estoppel, right?
Right.
The person relied on a promise, and to his detriment. His detriment was him going and testifying at the civil trial, right? And being open and honest at the civil trial and not invoking the Fifth Amendment. So since he did that to his detriment, even though the consideration didn't have to go back, come back, but now he had relied and promissory estoppel kicks in, meaning that the government is stopped from then not honoring that promise, right? Because he has already complied. He's actually already fulfilled his part of the deal. And that's exactly what the court came to now. Like, listen, he fulfilled his part of the deal. And that part of the deal is lifetime. Right, it's for the rest of his life. It's it's not like he's just give me for 10 years. It's like so it's lifetime. So they also barred any future prosecutions, even on new evidence, because they said they wouldn't prosecute him on this evidence. And the fact that the collateral piece to that was him testifying and incriminating himself, then it would not be fair then allow the state to find new evidence, to then come convict them again. So that's essentially what the judgment is. And now I do agree with the judgment, and I'll ask you because I've been talking for a while. How do you feel about this judgment?
So I think I think that legally the reasoning is sound on a policy matter, because we should be able to strike a deal with a prosecutor and be able to rely on that deal. Although technically it wasn't exactly a deal because it wasn't, it wasn't a two-way agreement, right? Because normally when we're talking about contracts, we have, I promise one thing.
Or for acceptance and consideration.
Exactly. So, both sides are giving something. But in this particular case, sometimes in contracts, we also have, what you said, what you called is a promissory estoppel, so sometimes in kind of rare cases, you can have a case where somebody is able to enforce a certain promise because they have, as in this case, relied to their detriment. I mean, that's a pretty big detriment because he's decided like, okay, I will go and provide testimony that I otherwise am entitled to not do under the Constitution. That's a very strong ability that he has to refuse to give testimony otherwise. So that was a pretty big detriment. So I do think that on a policy matter, like if we were to kind of eliminate the underlying facts for what the conviction was supposed to be for, right? Mm-hmm. And just and call this, put a different defendant in that box and put a different crime in that box, I would have the same opinion, regardless of what the facts are of the case. I think that we should have our criminal defendants that are, defending themselves and maybe have a civil case that accompanies that criminal case. They should be able to rely on those kinds of statements from the prosecutor. And it doesn't matter that you have a new lawyer that is acting on behalf of the district attorney. That's still a district attorney's office. And so that's the capacity with which the defendant is interacting with that lawyer. Yeah. So I think that legally, yes, I agree with that decision. Socially, morally, I think it's incredibly unfortunate because I think that based on the information that has come out on Bill Cosby over the years as to what he has done, it was a whole train of women, right? That that
40
he
or
left
50,
in his wake, and kind of did the same sort of thing, apparently, supposedly, according to what women have come out and said about him, assuming that information is true, which I don't have any way of deciding, whether or not that information is true. But I think it's incredibly unfortunate that it has to be on a case like this.
Oh yeah, but you know what though? I'm going to disagree with you. Well, I think it's unfortunate, yes, because they're the victims and everything. But I'm going to disagree with you on one thing. I think a case like this shows how good our system actually is, because it's to the point where I think Bill Cosby is not only guilty, he deserves to be in jail. But we're allowed to let him go free because the system and justice demands it. Justice demands he be in jail, but true justice demands that we let this man go free and try to do it the right way. So I think it shows the system does work, even though I understand we want the retribution. But sometimes the win is not in what happens, but how we get there. It's a means test. It's not the ends justify the means. It's a means test. It's how do we get there?
Completely agree. Yeah. I mean, I don't think that, I wouldn't say that just because of who it is that's in that hot seat in this case, that, that we should bend the rules. Absolutely not. We should have the same standard, regardless of who is in that hot seat, whether it's popular or unpopular for him to walk away, because that's how we know that the system is being objectively correct.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. And like you said earlier, you said it doesn't matter what the crime is, who the person was, and if the situation was itself or something again, you would still be of the same opinion. And that's the same thing I did. Morally, I think the guy should be in jail, but legally, I don't see how you can not think that this is the right decision, because essentially the prosecutor tried to have his cake he needed to, was end run around this guy's Fifth Amendment rights. That's exactly, and they played stupid games and won a stupid prize, and that stupid prize is, now you're barred from prosecuting the guy. It's like, how the hell we get there? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And this could have been done the right way. I think, maybe next time the prosecutor doesn't make that deal, because it's not for the state to get this person paid. Maybe that might have been a mistake. Maybe you wait to see if you can get some evidence to verify this. But it's sad, because I was seeing, some people, now you got a whole bunch of Bill Cosby fans, now he's innocent and everything. And that's the way it's going to be. But I don't think this is, but I also don't think the way the left is branding this is kind of like, it's a devastation for me too. It shows how women will never get justice. Look at what happened here. And and I don't think this is like some victory for Bill Cosby. This is just what happens with the system. This prosecutor did the wrong thing. He lied to the man. He said, "We're not going to prosecute you. Go ahead and It's funny, because when you're talking about promissory estoppel, there's a textbook case. I don't know. You've probably read this case. It's a Chestnut case in law school, where the grandfather tells the grandson, "I'm going to give you $10,000 on your 21st birthday if you don't drink or smoke until then." So then the kid does it, right? He does it. He's like 16. He doesn't drink, doesn't smoke. 21st birthday comes. He tells the grandfather, $10,000, please. The grandfather says, "No,
nope.
I was just it was a joke." And then he sued his grandfather, right? I sued him. He said, "Yeah, I'm suing him." He said, "He told me not to do this. I did it." And with the court, and generally back before this case, the court said, "Well, these are just promises. People don't have to pay out on promises." But right. This is where it starts calling what's known as now legal detriment. He did something to his legal detriment. He had a legal right to smoke and drink, and he deprived himself of that until the uncle, and by depriving himself of that to that time, and the uncle then had an obligation to pay. You can't, after the person has completed the task, then say, "I'm not going to pay." That's, it's reneging on a deal, and the law calls that legal. And that's essentially what promissory estoppel is. You're stopped because somebody else complied with what you said based on your promise. Your promise was a consideration. So right. In this case, in Cosby's case, that's exactly what this is. This is essentially promissory estoppel. They promised him, and he did he did something at his detriment, like you said, at his legal detriment, and that's where we're at now.
Yeah, and generally speaking, estoppel, I mean, it doesn't just show up in this kind of a case where someone has promised something and then, and then tries to back off on that promise. Estoppel is basically this idea that there should be, courts have read into some cases some amount of a standard of fairness that even though technically on a very technical level one side has won legally, if it would be a grand injustice to the other side, or they the side that technically won should be, or got there in an unfair way, that's usually where estoppel will come up. And it's in a case like this, particularly what it is that they're stopped from using the testimony that he only gave because of their reliance or because of their promise. Mm-hmm. So, if it had been some other situation where he's just trying to get something enforced for that promise, there might be some courts that still, despite that case, that earlier case that you mentioned, there might be some courts that would still be like, okay, maybe not. But because this is the government that was actually trying to use testimony that was directly tied to that promise that the government had given this individual, I mean, that's a pretty strong case for estoppel, for promissory estoppel.
Yeah. And it's a shame because one thing, well, one of the other last little pieces of the case, I would like to see how they ruled on the propensity evidence piece of it, because obviously, for those of you who know, generally in criminal cases, propensity evidence isn't allowed, and that means that, for instance, if I rob one person, then the state can bring in evidence that I've robbed 30 other people. And then generally a jury would then make the connection. Well, if he just robbed 30 other people, then it's more likely than not he robbed this 31st person. And the court doesn't want you to make conclusions like that as a juror. What they want you to do is make conclusions based on this case and these facts, not on what the person did in the past. That's essentially why character evidence is not allowed. Right. But in this case, they did allow 4 other victims to speak. And they were saying that, now obviously the prosecution was saying that these witnesses were coming forward based on a pattern of conduct. So that's one of the exceptions to the rule, is that let's say if we have a burglar, and every time they break into the safe he uses pizza sauce, then you find this guy using pizza sauce to break into a thing, then you can use the fact that this is it's so unique that you're really showing trait, motive, something like that, something that, hey, we got 25 bank vaults with all pizza sauce on it. It's just so unique, that's something it identifies the particularity of the crime. Right. But here I don't think they got that. What they were trying to sell was that, yes, because he had done this in the past, that means he was more likely he'd done this in the future, and that's propensity evidence. And so I really would have liked them, but they more or less said, well, since we got it in spades here, since we had the promise, then we don't have to go into the propensity argument. And that's kind of where they stayed. So it is what it is.
Yeah. So now my understanding is that they didn't remand it for a new trial, right? They just completely overturned it.
No, it's over.
And that's it.
Matter of fact, it's so bad they can't even bring charges again, even with new evidence.
Right.
Let's say they get a videotape of it happening. They can't even try them again for that.
Yeah, unless it's against a different victim, I suppose.
Yeah, different victim. Yes.
Yeah. Because now we would be in double jeopardy, right?
Yeah.
So
he's definitely been put in twice, and definitely on misconduct of the prosecutor, because that's essentially what this is, right? This is just the prosecution who messed up.
Ooh, which that sucks, because it's like, I remember studying for the bar exam and for the professional responsibility exam, the multi-state, the MPRE, multi-state.
MPRE,
yeah. And I remember how prosecutors have all of these extra requirements on top of every responsibility that normal lawyers have, because they are representing the government, because they have such a heavy force behind them. So they really have to be in line for professional responsibility requirements. So yeah, that's a little wild whenever you hear about potential misconduct coming from a prosecutor. But yeah, I mean, that's crazy.
But maybe misconduct may be strong. I don't think it was prosecutorial misconduct. It may just be mismanaged, because you had one prosecutor who made the deal. He leaves, and then you got another prosecutor who comes in and says, I don't like the deal. And then the courts, he goes to court, and the courts allow him to do it, right? They made this argument at the trial court. The trial court said, we're going to trial. Then he goes to the appellate court. They go, unanimous decision.
That's true.
It was a good call. And so the Supreme Court, they said, hold on, this shit is crazy.
Yeah.
And that's why you got to where we're at right now,
Yeah, that's very true. But I do want to mention, I want to hook on to double jeopardy one more time because it's so funny because that's something that comes up so often on Twitter. Yeah. You know how people become armchair lawyers on Twitter, and so they like to talk about the law sometimes without really understanding what the law is. This is actually, so double jeopardy, I've noticed, is one of those things that comes up. People ask about double jeopardy in, a civil case when a case has been dismissed, and they're like, well, would double jeopardy have anything to do with this? No, because that's just for criminal cases.
Yeah.
It's double jeopardy is basically the idea that you can be charged with a criminal case once and once only. I mean, unless there's a mistrial, in which case you haven't resulted in any kind of a conviction or any sort of a determination that someone is guilty or not guilty. If you've reached that level, that one shot is it. So I just wanted to mention that.
And it's interesting because jeopardy attaches, like for instance, when the jury's sworn in, then jeopardy attaches, where if it's the prosecutor's fault the trial is dismissed or something like that, then your double jeopardy would apply. Also, double jeopardy applies some instances too. A lot of people confuse double jeopardy with immunity, and they're close cousins, and sometimes they do apply. Like for instance, if you testify in front of the grand jury, sometimes you get transactional immunity. And that's a very powerful thing, And in this case, this was a kind of, instead of double jeopardy, this was a kind of transactional immunity. Well, actually, it was full immunity, right? Because it can't be tried again. Where the prosecutor's saying, "I'm not prosecuting," so that's a full immunity deal. If you testify in a civil trial, he testified in a civil trial, so now he's got full immunity, and the prosecutor can make that deal on behalf of the state.
Yeah. So crazy times.
Yeah, but I would have never suspected that Bill would have been like when I saw the news, I was like, wow, they really, like this, like something had to happen that was crazy, because I'm like, this is Bill Cosby,
Yeah. Many people, I mean, a lot of people considered him America's dad.
Yeah, but I'll ask you this, and I don't want to get too crazy here, but what happened? What's up with what's it called? What's up with what am I thinking about? The Me Too movement now seems to be very upset at this. Why do you think this is? Why do you think this is going crazy?
Well, I mean, I think that the Me Too movement. I think I understand why the Me Too movement, started, and there were a lot of allegations of sexual misconduct all around Hollywood and other, I guess, areas of the corporate world and whatnot. I think that to a certain extent, the Me Too movement needed to happen because there were so many women that were legitimately being victimized by their positions of I guess of a lack of power. However, I think that it definitely grew to a place where things started to become a little bit more, what's the word for it? A little bit stretched thin.
Yeah.
So and that's not, I'm not saying that that's the case here with Bill Cosby. This is probably a case that where the Me Too movement needed to exist and needed to be, to have a lot of strong voices in order to have a case like this come forward. Because as you said, everyone was completely flabbergasted when we heard about these allegations against Bill Cosby of all people. I mean, Bill Cosby, right? Like that's wild. Like the guy that we see as like a family man, and he even like the show Kids Say the Darndest Things, like we associate him with like wholesome family good time, so it's almost like there needed to be a massive push like the Me Too movement in order for people to take those kind of allegations seriously. But I understand why people would be incredibly emotional about this one, partly because that was one of the big cases that sort of blew the lid off of the Me Too movement. This one and Harvey Weinstein. And I at least those are the ones that I think of as like the two biggest earliest cases. And so I can understand why there would be a lot of women or men, advocates of the Me Too movement. Can be, any gender. I can understand why people would be incredibly upset and feel like there has been sort of a backsliding in the world with regards to this movement because of this.
Yeah.
However, I mean, we still have due process rights in any case, regardless of whether this is a case involving rape or, whether this is regarding, a defendant that previously had a lot of power in Hollywood or anywhere else in the world. I think I understand where outrage would be coming from. However,
Of course.
I personally don't share it, just because, just understanding the policy reason for why, all the reasons that we already went over.
Yeah, you understand the nuance of the argument. It's funny because when I first heard it, at first I was like, wow, something, but then I kind of calmed myself down because, like you're saying, being an advocate of the movement, but being an advocate of a system that does believe the allegations, but then goes on to verify what's happened and so forth and so forth. And I think in that moniker, in that vein, it's sad because we all know that this guy's a scum piece of crap, but on the other side, the legal side of me says, well, this is the ruling. It's one of those weird things where it's like it's a good ruling, but the outcome is still bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's one of those times where, and I know you mentioned this in your video too, how, we always want to see, like, the world is in a good place when, like, our what's legally right aligns with what's morally right.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's when we feel like we're satisfied, like everything is in alignment. But this is one of those cases where even though it's legally right, we feel like it's not morally right because we all kind of know, we all sort of have, I mean, I don't know, like I can't speak for everyone in the world. There's there's going to be someone that supports Bill Cosby, right?
But let's just be 40 people, they're all lying. We're talking about people from all walks of life. It's not a far stretch to say this guy's got problems, and he's got probably criminal problems. And a lot of these cases weren't brought because most of these states have these crazy 5-year statute of limitations, and you have one of the biggest actors. People are going to stay quiet for 5 or 6 years, and then when the floodgates open, it's too late. It's too late. And this, even in this case was from 2005. The statute of limitations was running out on this one too.
Yeah.
So it's and now again, it's unfortunate. Harvey Weinstein. The problem with him is that he just got caught up before the statute of limitations ran out, and they were able to get him. And so at least you have one. And I think that this shouldn't hurt the movement because of the bad legal outcome, because I think the movement is still served by Bill Cosby, because it's not like he's not going to be doing any more movies. He's not going to be doing, he is a pariah and people know what he's done, so he's a prisoner in that home. That Bill Cosby is not the same. And that's something that I think the Me Too movement can have callous. And hopefully he can go to jail. But at 83 years old, this man has spent like the last 3 years of his life in jail or something like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to be happy with what we got, even though I agree. We always fight for more, but there's some good that came here. This guy is not leaving this unscathed.
Right. Of course. Yeah, he's not going back to being America's dad.
Yeah.
That's for sure. The idea of him being around children now is like weird. Knowing what we all know. So I mean, so that's the other thing too, is that we have the alignment of what's legally right and what's morally right, and then we also have the alignment of legal consequences and social consequences. There's definitely different kinds of consequences. So obviously, the fact that the conviction was overturned, those are all just legal consequences that we're talking about. They're not the social consequences, which is what the United States, the culture in the United States and, even around the world, really has a say over. That no single judge is going to decide how he's received by the rest of the world now for the rest of his life. And now that's his legacy. So, I mean, that's still, like, regardless of what the court found in this case, to a certain extent, like there was no way he was ever going to recover from anything, even with the conviction being overturned.
Yeah. Well, one thing I think at the end of the day, we could all agree with this: Bill Cosby He got lucky, and hopefully his luck will eventually run out. But he's an 83-year-old man who's been disgraced.
Yeah.
Let it be gone. But again, I think if anybody who's a survivor or something like this, don't let this discourage you, because Bill Cosby just spent the last 2 years in prison. What I'm saying? That means something, and if he wouldn't have done, and he wouldn't have been in that position if it wasn't for this movement. This movement got to Bill Cosby.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. So, all right. Well, let me get the super chat really quick. So, Vianticus Prime, thank you so much for your super chat. My career goal is to be an armchair lawyer and doctor and general and construction worker and many other things. Video games are great. Yes, video games are great. And YouTube is also great for helping people become an armchair lawyer, armchair doctor, and all of these other fun things.
Yeah, look at just Jeffrey Toobin, right? He can do what he did. He can still have his job, right? Conservative. If that was just imagine if that was Sean Hannity. He wouldn't be working anymore, right? He wouldn't.
No
be
way.
Anymore.
No way. No way. Bill O'Reilly is an example of someone who has not come back because of the Me Too movement. At least not yet, right?
But the one thing that always makes you laugh with the Jeffrey Toobin thing is that when he told the story, he was like, "We had a 5-minute break." I'm like, so you did that on a 5-minute break? Like, it's not what like we were ending the day. It's like, I gotta just get one off. It's like we had a fight. Like, they're like, all right, go get some water. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Actually, let me just take you. Like, goddamn, Jeffrey, calm down. You got a problem, brother. You got a problem.
Yes, I definitely agree. 5 minutes is not a long time to think. Let me work on something.
Right in front of the camera too. But that's probably why he was doing it in front of the camera. He was like, shit, time is running. I got 4 minutes and 55 seconds left.
I know. I mean, or at least use a Snowden window, right? One of those things that slides over the camera.
What? You don't got to stand up. Why does he got to stand up and show the cameras? Like, go to the back room or something. Like, I'm always freaked out anyway with the cameras being on. After coming out the shower, I'm like G.I. Joe here, looking around, like making sure, like, oh my God, somebody could be looking. Jeffrey Toobin doesn't care. But now he's making his $100,000 job sitting there armchair lawyering. It's good if you can get it. It's good money if you can get it.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, okay. So then another big one that happened this week was Facebook. The Facebook lawsuit was dismissed, which actually, personally, I know that the headlines have all been like, this is a massive blow to the states for antitrust law and all this stuff. It's like, oh no, Facebook won everything and now we're all enslaved by Facebook. But it's actually not quite as serious of a blow. I mean, it sucks. It sucks for the FTC and for the states to have your case be dismissed. However, the court dismissed it without prejudice and with leave to amend, so they can come back within 30 days and refile, fix whatever needs to be fixed, and refile. So it's not the absolute end of the world, but it does. It is painful. It is painful. You don't want that to happen.
When the judge reading that judge's opinion, he wasn't too kind to the person who drafted that lawsuit, right? He was just like, because I did one of the 4-minute videos on it. He wasn't kind at all. He was kind of like saying, like, whoever wrote this up don't know what the F they doing, because they just ain't telling me what, like they said, the reason why Facebook was a monopoly because they had 60% plus market share. And he's like, you don't tell me what market share. How did you even get to the 60 plus number? You gave me no facts. You just put out a number 60 plus and think of course you need more facts. Go amend this, When it comes to this, that there's a conspiracy. No, this doesn't work. Go amend this and come back, because it was kind of like you got 48 states in the FTC. You can't get a couple of competent lawyers to put together some facts. And one thing I noticed too, also when doing the research for this, Google's monopoly is like 80% of the market. They have 80% market. The FTC even taking the allegations is true. They said Facebook has 60% of the market share in personal networking service, social media, a very niche out of the niche market. But in most other markets, Google has YouTube has like 90% of the market for video share. There's so many other companies that just have like total. It's like so huge market share that Facebook doesn't even come close to it. And Facebook is actually still now starting to fight for market share with TikTok and some other companies too. So it's fascinating how I think even the monopoly argument is weaker for Facebook. I think it would have been better for the government to go after Google, because Google has such an overwhelming monopoly in multiple different markets, video sharing market and the search engine market. You could attack both of those at the same time. You hit them both, equally. And if Google goes down, then Facebook is going to be scared all of them, and you can use it to bring them to the table. But I think going after Facebook, you're going after low hanging fruit. But Facebook doesn't have that monopolistic power as they had before.
Yeah, I mean, and this is where antitrust law is instantly difficult, right? Because it all comes down to how they define that market. And so I guess especially when it comes to new technologies, that makes it even more difficult, right? Because you can say, all right, so all of the apple growers in the United States, you can define that fairly easily. Like how many farmers out there growing and selling apples. That's something that you can kind of figure out relatively easily. But something that is so conceptual as personal networking services, there are the definition of social media is a little bit flexible, right? Because, social media is not just the obvious, like, Facebook and Twitter and, YouTube, but, so I've heard the definition of social media as also including, let's say the Garmin app that you can, share your running times and schedules, with a friend. That is considered social networking too. Same thing with, commenting on a Wall Street Journal article. You are interacting with other people, commenting on that article on their website. So that technically is social media as well, because you're engaging with it, right?
Yeah.
So that is one of those things that that is a little bit more complicated in these kinds of cases, because it's so incredibly conceptual, and everything comes down to where those boundaries get drawn. So yeah, it's
no, I agree with you 100%. I think it's very ambiguous what social media is, especially because you got Instagram. But I think what they're talking about is that, because one thing that Facebook has done, which I think is important, is that they've been able to monetize your personal life. They're monetizing your pictures, your experiences. That's essentially what they're doing. Yes. They're being able to put it on their platform, and they show ads in front of it, and they've now made you the product for Facebook is you, to the advertisers too. You're their product. Yes. And they get you for free and sell you off to someone else. But I also think with that, Facebook, I think to narrow it, they made sure to narrow it to personal networking services. Like, for instance, like LinkedIn would be professional networking services. And when they say personal networking services, they are talking about like a file, like sharing, pictures and things of that nature, and having personal network connections, like in that sense.
Yeah.
So they tried to really define it, but there's so much crossover between one platform and another. Like you're saying, YouTube, you can make an argument that YouTube is a video form of Facebook, right? Facebook put pictures, YouTube puts videos. So they kind of do the same thing. And there's just so much cross. Even now, Twitter can do kind of all three. It's got a Facebook element to it. It's got a YouTube element to it. So I think at the end of the day, though, what you're really looking at for this is that anti-competitive piece of it. And I think that's what they're really trying to hammer on. Is Facebook buying these companies like WhatsApp and that's essentially what the complaint was saying. They bought WhatsApp and they bought Instagram to keep a monopoly. But but they're competitors with Google. They're competitors with all these other places. Google had Google Plus for a time. Remember Google Plus?
Yeah.
And they couldn't keep Google Plus up because Facebook was beating them. So, so it's not like there wasn't any market. There had to be market competition for Facebook. It's just that they've been better at it. And I don't think they've had an unnatural monopoly, because, again, Google, the biggest monopoly in search engines, has tried, and they've lost to Facebook.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree, because it's one of the ways that that you can also kind of look at to determine, where those market boundaries are, is like essentially the stickiness of the consumer, right? Because everything needs to come down to like the consumer's perspective, because the end goal of antitrust law is to protect consumers. You do that by protecting competition. So usually the vehicle for that is other businesses suing big businesses, for their monopolization, et cetera. But usually, the analysis is that it needs to be in order to protect the consumer. So that's what the court is going to care about. So, the courts will look at like the stickiness of the market. So if a consumer is able to jump from one product to another very easily. So in the Apple and Google cases, the courts are looking at, how easy is it for a consumer to jump from an iPhone using iOS. I mean, it's actually not an iPhone, but they're looking at iOS specifically. Yeah. How easy is it for them to jump from iOS to the Google Play Store, or vice versa? Well, I just kind of slipped on that because I alluded to the fact that the one of the big barriers is the hardware. You have to buy a whole new new hardware for it. And so, how much of a barrier is that? That's all a factual sort of analysis that has to be done by the court. But, how much of a barrier is there for a consumer to jump from one to another? And in this kind of a case, again, it's unique because the product is also the consumer. So it's a weird sort of mix. And the consumer is getting the product through their attention. So, people's attention on various platforms is also sort of a necessary element in these situations.
Yeah, but I also want to say too, it's weird too, the monopolistic piece to this, and the reason why I'm saying that is because even though I understand Facebook makes money, the relationship Facebook has with us is not really as one as consumers, but kind of one as products for consumers, and those consumers are advertisers, right? Advertisers want to show us money, and that's and in that instance, because we use Facebook for free, so it's kind of like as long as this is not like Standard Oil. You have to go pay for oil. The only place you can buy oil from was Standard Oil or AT&T. If you want to make a phone call in the United States, guess what? You're using AT&T. So those type of monopolies. In the sense where I think Facebook, there was a MySpace, there was a Facebook, there was this, was that, and it seems like it's always evolving. And Facebook has kept hold for a little longer. But even their market share is going, because a lot of people, if you ask 10 years ago, did they use Facebook every day? Yeah, but now if you ask most people if they use Facebook every day, it's going to be harder to find people who use Facebook every day. So that's what I'm talking about. An ever-changing market, understanding different market dynamics.
Yeah,
I do understand what the government wants to say, but I think I don't think they need to loosen the antitrust laws. What I do think they need to do is maybe massage 230 a little bit, or find a way to actually rein in these tech companies, especially because don't forget, I think, and you could do that based on privacy. If you're going to keep people's data, give people power over their data, and that will then force them to change their habits, because that'll be messing with their money. The data is where the power is at, not the actual person. Me logging on is nothing, but you being able to track what I do and target ads to me, that's the value of this. You know what I mean?
Especially across platforms.
Yes.
That's the part that's crazy, is when you, what's even crazier is when people feel like I don't know if this is actually true, or if this is like just sort of like one of those things that just kind of happens, but like, when you're like talking about something, you happen to be nearby your phone or whatever, and then eventually, like the next day you go and you see on Facebook there's an ad related to what you were talking about the day before. It could be related somehow to something that you've searched, but there have been plenty of people that have very much questioned whether or not their phones were listening to them, or their other tech was listening to them, and tracking them in that respect.
But of course, my phone's listening to me. Alexa's listening to us. Everybody's listening to us. But to be honest with you, I don't mind targeted ads. I'd rather them show me stuff that I want to buy. Like she's watching the show The Backyardigans. Now I'm getting ads for The Backyardigans. I understand, but I would rather be targeted for things that I would think they like, instead of because I'm not wearing bras. I don't want to see a bra commercial. Not no offense. I don't have anything against bras, but I just don't. I don't need to see a commercial for it. So.
Yeah,
but it's funny because my wife is also against. She hates the targeted that did the. I'm like, but yeah, but it shows you things you like. It doesn't show you things that it's necessary. I feel it's more efficient, but to each his own,
But it does very much feel like someone knows too much about me that I haven't actually told them about myself. There is that little like invasive feeling that you can get from that, to feel Like I haven't actually revealed that. So how do you know?
That's true.
So,
That's true. Well, listen, we're an hour, and this actually we got through some pretty intense topics tonight because these topics were pretty intense. The conservatorship took a little longer, but I actually think the Bill Cosby stuff is just fascinating legally. Legally, it's an interesting the quirks of the law that works, and to see how the lower courts actually got it wrong, because I think at the end of the day, I think the Supreme Court got it right, even though the decision's just it's unfortunate, but
yeah. No, I agree. The one thing that we didn't talk about was the eviction moratorium.
Oh yeah, that's over now, right?
Well, no,
the Supreme Court upheld it.
Yeah, in a 5-4 decision, which it was interesting. Justice Brett Kavanaugh penned the opinion, and he sided with Justice Roberts and the liberal justices on the court. I mean, basically, he said he would have overturned it, just like the lower court wanted to. However, because there's just a month left, he's saying that this will allow the government to have a smoother transition for people that will now have 30 days essentially to not or to worry about the eviction ban being over in 30 days. So it sounds like he's kind of relying on the fact that the federal government has said that they're not going to extend it again.
Yeah.
So which is kind of weird for a Supreme Court opinion, but
yeah, but state law can do that though. I don't know. Like I know here in New York, the state, even though they have the eviction moratorium at the federal level, the state law still they still had the statewide evictions moratorium. So it's interesting because I would think more states would have just done that because it's just the right thing to do. But who knows? Yeah. All right. Well, this was definitely fun. Thank you to everybody in the chat. Somebody says I need to go to Discord to see an arrest warrant. Oh, Christina. Hey, Christina.
After you're done here.
I might stop. I might drop by there. I have to wake up tomorrow because I got to do a couple of things, but hopefully it won't be as hot as tomorrow because it was like so hot.
Well, I mean, definitely keep cool, and otherwise, before we meet next week, it'll have been 4th of July. So happy 4th to everyone. Woo! I mean, to everyone in the United States, right? All the people that celebrate. I don't want to assume because we have had viewers from all around the world. So unless you want to celebrate with us, that's totally cool too, right? I mean, we welcome all folks. So otherwise, happy 4th, happy Independence Day, and have a great weekend. All right. See ya.